And so we arrive at the last day of Lent, day 40, but it will not be the last of these talks. Wait till tomorrow morning. Easter Saturday, Sabbath, Shabbat. Somehow Easter Saturday always reminds me of the final speech of the prince in Romeo and Juliet. The young people are dead, the old people have wrought their destruction. And the prince says, a glooming peace this morning with it brings, the sun for sorrow will not show his head. Long before the coronavirus, Wendy and I were in a city shut down far more completely than we're experiencing right now. The marketplace was empty, no more traffic in the streets, the builders' tools were silent, no more time to harvest wheat. Busy housewives ceased their labours, in the courtroom no debate. Work on earth was all suspended. Why? Because it was the Day of Atonement in Jerusalem, Yom Kippur. Let me show you a Google map of Jerusalem. That light area in the top left is a suburb called Mea Shearim. It's a densely crowded area, and that's where the Orthodox Jews of Jerusalem choose to live. Down to the right, we see the old city of Jerusalem, and here is the Western Wall, the holiest place of all. Why do the Orthodox Jews choose to live in that crowded area? The reason is that it's less than 3,600 cubits from the Western Wall, a Sabbath day's journey, and they want to be at that holy site on the Shabbat. So they choose where they live according to the Shabbat. That's how seriously they take it. We lived at the Garden Tomb just to the north of the old city, and in the new city of Jerusalem is the Great Synagogue. And so Wendy and I decided on the Day of Atonement to visit the Great Synagogue. We had to walk, of course. There was no public transport. We could have walked right down the middle of the busiest roads in Jerusalem. There was no traffic in the streets. I'm afraid we slightly exceeded our 3,600 cubits, that's about a kilometer, and we came to the Great Synagogue. And so Wendy and I went in. She went up to the women's gallery, I sat among the men. We sat there for about 2 hours, and I learnt a lot in those 2 hours. Do you know the cantors, the choir, sing non-stop for 25 hours with no other sustenance than cold water? So seriously do they take the Shabbat. What was it like inside the old city that first Easter Saturday? Well, I think it was similar. It was quiet and deserted. People were indoors, nursing their bruises from the trauma of the day before, and trying to gain some energy for the week that stretched ahead of them. They felt empty and hopeless. It was very silent. If the modern world needs anything right now, it needs silence. The kind of silence where people examine themselves, examine their motives and their goals, and examine their relationship before their Maker. Silence. So what was God doing on that first Easter Saturday? Well, I think he was doing what he did on the first Shabbat. In Genesis 2 verse 2 we read, "And on the seventh day God finished all the work that he had planned, and he rested from all his work." And so God rested from the work that he had planned to do. It is finished. It wasn't just a passive rest. He was gathering strength for the battle that was to come. I read the account by a soldier in the American Civil War of what it was like the night before a great attack. He said the closer they got to dawn, the quieter it became, until it was as quiet as a church. Well, I guess he'd never been to one of our churches. He said it was as if everyone was gathering strength for the battle to come. And then at dawn, 1,000 cannons roared forth and hurled their anger at the enemy, and the earth was filled with an undescribable noise. That's a little how I see God on that first Easter Shabbat, gathering strength for the battle that lay ahead. For when dawn came, he would launch a salvo at the kingdoms of darkness from which they would never recover. And so I leave us this Easter Saturday with 2 words: silence and rest.